Today, I'm going to give a little overview on the county's efforts to prepare for sea level rise, and I'll talk a little bit about what sea level rise means for San Mateo County. I've been working on sea level rise since 2008. When I was in grad school, I was working on climate change, and I heard that we already are committed to a certain amount of sea level rise based on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we've released. And I felt that this really compelled me to want to take action to start preparing for something that we really know is happening. We just don't know how much or at what time. So as Supervisor Pine mentioned, the county is the most vulnerable county in the state of California, according to the Pacific Institute report. So sea level rise has the ability to affect everyone living and working in the county. And some of the impacts that we will see here with sea level rise, we already see today, as Supervisor Pine mentioned, with flooding. So we'll have impacts to our transportation networks. This is Highway 101 in a storm last winter. And then, as Supervisor Pine mentioned, this is the trailer park that he mentioned in Redwood City. One of the things that's impacted is our low-lying communities. So along the Bay Shore, and then this is in 1998, the El Nino flooding in East Palo Alto. On the coast side, sea level rise will lead to an increase in erosion, and erosion, as you can see, is already a serious issue. These are photos from Pacifica. And one thing that people might not realize is that along the Bay Shore and parts of the coastline, that's where we used to put our trash. So there's a lot of landfills, and those are now closed. But if they're flooded, this could lead to water quality impacts. And here you can see just how much fill there was put in here between, I think it says 1940 to 1994. We have 7 wastewater treatment facilities in the county, all of which are at sea level. And so these are at risk from flooding today. And this is where it doesn't really matter where you are in the county, you're reliant on a wastewater treatment plant that is located right along the shoreline. Also, many businesses, as I'm sure most of us are aware, are located right along the shoreline in these great campuses. So we have Visa, Gilead, Facebook, Oracle, Genentech, and a number of others that are located in areas. A lot of them are built up high, so they might not be flooding today, but when you look at the sea level rise maps, they start to experience flooding. Also, sea level rise could lead to the loss of beaches and erosion of coastal trails, as well as hazardous conditions for beachgoers. Here, this is a photo of Surfers Beach at Half Moon Bay, and as you can see, at high tide, there already is no beach, and the bike path has started to erode away and splash up on Highway 1. The erosion here is primarily due to, there's a breakwater that's blocking the sediment for coming in to the beach, but as sea levels rise, the erosion at this area would be exacerbated. Also, wetlands are an important part of our coastal protection, as well as our providing water quality benefits and habitats. And if wetlands don't have room to move inland, or if they're not able to accumulate sediment at a rate fast enough, they will be converted to open water. So it's important to make sure that our wetlands are able to keep pace with sea level rise, or that we are restoring new wetlands as well. So wetlands provide critical habitat for species, they filter toxins, and like I mentioned, they are able to slow down the wave energy, so they provide flood protection. Here's a chart showing the current best available science on sea level rise for California. This is from the National Research Council report on sea level rise in California, Oregon, and Washington. And so these projections say that sea levels could rise from about 1/2 foot to 2 feet by 2050, and by 2100 we could see 17 inches to 5.5 feet. And the reason why we have such large ranges are we don't know how much we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in the future, and we also don't know how fast ice sheets are going to melt. So those are the main 2 uncertainty drivers in the ranges. So this is an image from the Arcosa Future tool that Flora mentioned. This is 3.5 feet with no storm. So you can see with 3.5 feet, the levees are over top. So this means that the low-lying areas are flooded. And another mapping tool that we've come across as part of this project is this historic map, which the Oakland Museum put together, and this overlays the historic wetlands with our current development patterns. And so this is the 1850 shoreline in green, and you can see it kind of goes over 101 and really covers a lot of what we've already developed. And those low-lying areas that used to be wetlands are the first areas where the sea levels will, where the flooding will occur. So what can we do about these risks and this issue for our county? The first step is to understand what is at risk and when. And the county has received grant funds from the Coastal Conservancy to complete a 10-month vulnerability assessment project for both the bay and the coastal shorelines. We've hired Arcadis Consulting to conduct the technical portion of the study. And the goals of the study are to understand what's at risk from flooding today and in the future, what are the consequences, and then what can we do about those risks. So here's an overview of the project steps. We're doing an asset-based vulnerability assessment, and by assets, we're referring to built, natural, and community assets. And to date, we've gathered data on assets for the county, and we have developed draft inundation maps and have started categorizing all of the assets by city that are at risk, and we'll have those for review soon. And what we plan to do is, because we can't do a detailed look at every single asset at this point. We are, in coordination with our stakeholder groups, picking 30 assets that we'll do a detailed vulnerability assessment profile on. And the goal of those assets are to have representative assets. So a wastewater treatment plant, community centers, hospitals, a portion of Highway 1, or roads, beach, wetlands, so that those can serve as templates to fill out the vulnerability, detailed vulnerability for the county. So at this point, we just sent out a survey. People can recommend particular assets that they would like to have considered in that 30, and then once we have a draft 30, we'll take recommendations. But we think that's enough to tell a really good story about what's at risk and then come up with a work plan in the future for taking action. So we have a number of stakeholder groups that we are working with to conduct the study. There are 20 cities in the county, and so we have representatives from public works staff and those who are asset managers from the cities, as well as those from businesses, community groups, people who manage wetlands, and other potential asset managers are on our technical working group, our policy advisory committee, our high-level staff from cities and businesses and so forth, as well as elected officials. And then we also have just kicked off a community task force, which are people who are helping inform our public outreach efforts. And I think I'd be curious if those who have applied to be on the task force, anyone here today wants to raise their hand? I know there's just a couple. Anyone who has participated in our other stakeholder meetings? Okay, there's a few people. So we have our next meeting, technical working group meeting, is December 10th. We have a public workshop where we'll be unveiling our inventory of assets and our maps on December 12th. So what can we do to prepare for this issue? There are a number of different strategies, and preparing is going to mean a suite of these different strategies. So I wanted to highlight just a couple. As I mentioned, wetlands provide, I would say one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce risk. And we have the opportunity to restore wetlands in our bay. We've lost 85 to 90% of the wetlands in our county. And here is an image in just a year from the South Bay Salt Pond project of how the wetland has come back in this one area. And also wanted to give an example of living shorelines that have already been created in the bay. This is an example from San Rafael. The Coastal Conservancy, in partnership with others, funded a project to build an oyster reef in front of the shoreline in San Rafael. And they had over 2 million oysters colonized, and this reduced the force of the waves in this area. And in San Mateo County, we have a test plot at Oyster Point, and so they are evaluating whether this is something that's feasible here. And then also, here's the hybrid approach. So this is referred to as a horizontal levee. I'm sure many of you may be familiar with this approach developed by the Bay Institute. So if you put a marsh, which can attenuate waves, in front of a levee, they were able to find that you could reduce the height of the levee from 3.5 feet to 7 feet. And then I'll wrap up in here in a little bit. I wanted to just make an announcement about El Nino this winter. We're getting storms, but the warmer water also means elevated, higher water levels. So, because warmer water expands, we already are seeing a 1/2 foot higher water levels today. And when you combine that with our highest tides of the year, which are coming up next week, we could have 1.5 to 2 feet higher water level than the average high tide. And so if we were to get a storm next week on top of an additional 2 feet, we could really see a lot of flooding. And so one thing that you all can do to help is understand, what does 2 feet of water look like for a county? Are there any levees that are overtopped? Are there anywhere that is already flooding? And getting photos of that will help us compare that to our flood map that we have from our Coastal Future and see if it looks accurate. So we are holding 2 King Tides and coffee events, because the King Tides are happening right around coffee time. One at Surfers Beach at 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, and then one at Curiosity at Coyote Point, and that's going to start about 9:15. The high tide is at 10:15, so you can come grab coffee, talk to Supervisor Pine and others at the county, and go take photos. So that's, we have our website for more information about the events. And that's it.
A question about how well these studies are integrated with those further north into San Francisco County and further south into Santa Clara County.
We have been coordinating with the other partners in the Bay. So I've been talking regularly with those in Marin and San Francisco, and especially the Bay Conservation Development Commission, which has been working closely with the other counties on their studies. So we're using similar methodology. In fact, we've just hired another consultant to do a separate mapping exercise that's similar to exactly what San Francisco County has done. So we can compare that method to the Our Coastal Future tool, so that we can have comparable results within the county. Okay, great, thank you.